Just assuming it lines up with one of these. Oh yeah, it's trying to recommend that new film when I look it up. 1861. Do we have... Well, it says 1861 to 1865. Yeah, I guess it wasn't as long as I thought it was. But we do have the end of the Civil War, which was the start of Reconstruction there. 1906, right around the turn of the century. Around it's actually around the time that our buddy Schoenberg started writing atonal music, for instance. 1948. Well, we know what land was founded that year. We also know that World War II ended that year. 89 to 90. 90s was probably the most degenerate decade, well, up until now. And then 2031. Yep, just after the whole 2030 agenda. Yep. And then 2073 is the last significant date that I wrote. But those are some interesting dates. Yeah. Food for thought. So, Jubilee. The year after 7 Shemitah periods, so the first 4 Shemitas, as Silas has stated, are they're periods of destruction. The final 3 are periods to set up the new system in the cycle. That is, of course, right before the Jubilee year, in which the new cycle begins. The Jubilee is the year that follows the passage of 7 weeks of years. 7 cycles of sabbatical cycles, or 49 total years. The 50th year deals largely with land, property, and property rights, according to the regulations found in the book of Leviticus. Certain indentured servants would be released from servitude, some debts would be forgiven, and everyone was supposed to return their own property in Jubilee years. Well, which servants do you think those were? Do you think it was maybe... Because technically you weren't supposed to enslave a fellow Hyksossian, but if you did, you were supposed to release them after a period of time. Well, if that happened, it's usually, I think it was 7 years. And if the 7 years happens to be in the middle of a Jubilee, well, you have to release them anyways. Do you think they released our people? I don't think so. That's just that slide. All right, give me just a second. All right, so the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Menachem Mendel Schneerson, explained that in the Hebrew year 5750, 1989 to 1990, I actually forgot that. See, I was using that because that was a pretty degenerate decade. The 90s were awful, and, oof. See, the problem is I like, well, yeah, like I said, I'm a younger person, but that's still technically a little before my time, but I do like a lot of 90s music, I'm not gonna lie. A lot of it's very degenerate, but I like the sound of it. I think they came up with a bunch of new technology around that time. So you had a bunch of new pedals, sounds going on. But anyways, and it sounds less cheesy than the 80s electronic stuff they were doing. The millennial time clock had reached the time of the eve of the Shabbat. That is to say, the equivalent of Friday afternoon before Shabbat. Just as a solar noon marks the time when the 3/4, 18 of 24 hours of the Hyksossian day has passed, the year 5750 marks when 3/4 of the 6th millennium has passed. So, what they're saying is, ever since the 90s, which a lot of people wish we could go back to the 90s, a lot of people say that. You ever wonder why the 90s seems like it was possibly the last good decade when it was completely and totally degenerate? That's because that's when they started ramping stuff up. That was the start of the final hours. So we've been in that process, and the closer we get to where they want to be, the worse things are going to get. It's been getting worse since the 90s, and that was planned. So, it is a Hicksosian law. It is recommended to avoid normal work for 7 hours, either 2.5 hours or 5.5 hours preceding Shabbat, so as to reserve time for Shabbat preparations. By analogy, one might prepare for the coming of the Messiah prior to the year 6000. 2.5 or 2.5 or 5.5 hours would translate to approximately 104 or 229 years, respectively. Thus, the year 5896, so 2135, pretty much AD, or 2010, 2011. Now, I think in this case, they're probably using 2010, 2011. That's right before right before the Trump era, I will say. The Lubavitcher Rebbe, as others, maintain that the Messiah must arrive at or before the onset of the Shabbat, the year 6000. So he has to arrive on that year or before. And they have a lot of different ideas about this, but one of the ideas is that most people have to be dead by the time he arrives. So even if you want to just see how this plays out, you might not even get to see the end of it. They don't want you to see the end of it. Although they'll be happy to gloat right before the end, right before their major plan. They'll make sure to gloat. Believe me, they love gloating. So the end of and I mean, they've been waiting so long to gloat like this. They let out little gloats in their shows and movies and stuff they produce. They gloat in our face. It's funny to say gloat now. It doesn't sound like a word, but they're going to make extra sure at that point to gloat. The end of the year 2024. I thought it was going to be something on that. It's just showing the current time. It's me getting sketched out. I actually am getting really sketched out with a lot of the stuff that's going on. I'm predicting things are really going to ramp up this year into next year, and next year is a pivotal year, and we'll get to that. The Kabbalist teacher Shlomo Eliashiv wrote in Dressel Alom HaTahu, that is why so much time must transpire from the time of creation until the time of Tikkun, or, the correction. It's basically their whole Tikkun Olam. What it means is they're going to destroy us all because they see us as an error, essentially. All the forces of Gevurat, strict judgment, are rooted in the 6 Sephirot: Hesed, Gevurah, Teferet, Netzach, Hod, and Yesod, which are the 6 days of creation. So, basically, the Sephirot that you see, those little dots that you see on the Kabbalah tree, which we'll get into in our Kabbalah series, those partially represent the 6 days of creation. That's not entirely false. It also represents the 6 millenniums, and also the 6,000 years of history that the world will exist. And within 6 Sephirot are the roots of all that will happen from the 6 days of creation until the final Tikkun. We will find all that transpires as the result of the sparks from the time of Tohu, or chaos. In an interview with Holy Land National Radio, Rebbetzin Esther Younggrills said the following. Hold up. Testing. You guys can still hear me very clearly, right? Seems like... Oh, yeah, my microphone got a bit shifted. I just want to make sure you could hear that all well. I don't want to keep going if... All right. I'm not seeing anything, but I'll pay attention to the chat. I don't want to keep going if you guys can't hear me good. Where was I at? Oh, yeah. Listen carefully, friends, to what I am telling you. Hashem, which is it means the name. It's the name of their God. Well, it's not the name, but they don't want to say the name, so it's their God. So, Hashem, Elokei Israel, the God of the Holy Land, created this world that we are living in today in 6 days. Every day was 1,000 years. This world as we know it today cannot last beyond 6,000 years. Right now we are in the year 5769, which means it is the eve of the Shabbos of the world. By the year 6000, Mashiach has to be here. He could be here much earlier. Guys. He could be here tomorrow if he wanted to be. I don't think that's the case. But by the year 6000, he has to be here. The Vilna Gaon said that was the last war, Milchemet war, or Gog Umagog, is going to last only 12 minutes because they are going to have such weapons. So if we translate 12 minutes, that's about 8.33 in years. Yeah, it's about 8.33 years. So that actually leads us just about, if you started World War III about where we're at now, which is likely going to be Gog Magog with this whole Holy Land conflict, well, then that puts us at maybe max 8 years, is how I see it. Max 8 years that this war is going to last. So I think this war basically will take us up until their whole agenda takes place and is laid out in front of us. So we know that the final redemption, the final Geula, is going to be like when you left Egypt. Only 1/5 of our people left Egypt. 4/5 perished during the plague of darkness. They don't mind losing a few lower class Hyksos people. It doesn't matter to them. It's nothing. It actually isn't. They act like they care a whole lot about their people. They don't. They actually don't. Their people are just as much of a tool as we are, except they like them because they're just as immoral and they share the same blood. So I'm appealing to every Hyksos. Every negative prophecy can be changed. We can bring Mashiach today. Right now we are living in a period called Erev, or Shabbat. It's Erev Shabbat because when Mashiach will come, it will be a day that will be all Shabbat, the 7th day. Let's bring Shabbos early, and let's bring Shabbos with Menucha, with Shalom. Oh yeah, with ease, with peace. Shalom doesn't necessarily mean peace, by the way. Simcha, happiness. Is it possible? Absolutely. Every negative prophecy can be changed. Well, they say negative meaning negative for them. They want their people to feel like they have a chance. I actually think they'll end up killing off most of their people. But whether they do or whether they don't, either way it's bad for us.